The courtroom was quiet, almost reverent, but under the calm surface, tension thrummed like a barely contained storm. Journalists shifted in their seats, pens poised, cameras angled, whispering speculation. This wasn't an ordinary case, and the people in the room knew it. Even the judge, an experienced man who had presided over hundreds of cases, leaned forward in his chair, eyebrows raised in curiosity. On one side of the room, the prosecution and defense had already taken their seats, papers neatly stacked, their faces professional yet marked with anticipation. But all eyes, consciously or unconsciously, kept drifting toward the unusual figures who had just entered. A tiny 3-year-old girl, clutching her mother's hand, and a massive police dog sitting obediently beside her. The girl's small hand trembled slightly in her mother's grip, but her wide, innocent eyes, bright and curious, scanned the room without fear. She was dressed simply, in a pink dress patterned with tiny flowers, her golden hair falling softly around her face. There was a quiet bravery about her, something that belied her age. She didn't understand fully why she was there or the importance of the legal proceedings surrounding her, but she felt a strange sense of safety. That safety was embodied entirely in the form of Rex, the police dog who sat calmly at her side, his golden brown eyes alert yet gentle, his massive frame imposing yet non-threatening. His harness bore the familiar symbols of law enforcement. A badge, an official patch, and a leash rested loosely in the mother's other hand, as though it were an extension of the girl herself. From the moment Rex entered the room, there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. People unconsciously straightened in their seats. Officers on duty, normally unfazed by intense courtroom drama, leaned forward, unable to take their eyes off the dog. His presence commanded attention, not through aggression, but through something far more compelling: authority paired with empathy. It was as if Rex, with his calm, intelligent gaze, had a silent message for everyone present. "Watch closely," he seemed to say. "Something important is about to unfold." The spectators whispered amongst themselves, voices low, tinged with curiosity and awe. A toddler in court is always unusual, but one standing shoulder to shoulder with a police dog was unheard of. A few journalists raised their cameras, capturing the scene for the evening news, knowing that whatever happened here would make headlines. Yet, despite all the attention, the girl and Rex were oblivious, or perhaps too focused on each other to notice. Their connection was subtle, but unmistakable. Every slight movement from her hand, every soft sound she made, was mirrored in Rex's posture, his ears twitching slightly, his eyes following her like a shadow. The judge cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "We are gathered here today for an unusual case," he began, his voice calm but resonant. "One that involves not just legal matters, but also matters of trust, courage, and the human-animal bond." There was a faint murmur from the gallery, as though the words themselves carried an unusual weight. He paused, glancing at the tiny girl and her canine companion. "We ask everyone to pay close attention. Today, we may witness something remarkable." The mother knelt beside her daughter for a brief moment, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're brave," she whispered softly, her voice almost drowned out by the hushed murmurs of the room. The girl nodded, a tiny but resolute gesture, and straightened her back. She didn't fully understand bravery, not in the way adults did, but she felt it in the form of warmth and reassurance radiating from Rex. The dog gave a soft exhale, a sound that was almost like a sigh, and nudged her hand with his nose. It was subtle, gentle, and entirely reassuring. The little girl smiled a small, radiant expression that seemed to brighten the room, despite the heavy atmosphere of the courtroom. But it wasn't just the girl who felt this connection. Observers, even those hardened by years of courtroom battles, couldn't help but feel a sense of calm and awe. There was a purity in the moment, something untouched by the bitterness or aggression that usually fills such rooms. It was as if time slowed down, allowing everyone present to absorb the gravity and simplicity of the bond between a child and a dog. This bond was powerful in its simplicity. Trust without conditions, loyalty without hesitation, and love without expectation. In the weeks leading up to this day, few could have predicted the impact this pair would have on the legal proceedings. Rex had been extensively trained to detect danger, assist officers, and provide protection, but what he was now demonstrating went far beyond his official duties. He was providing emotional support, a calming presence that even seasoned professionals found remarkable. The little girl had initially been frightened of the world, shy and hesitant around strangers. Her life had recently been touched by chaos, leaving her unsure and wary. But with Rex, she had found safety. And today, that safety would become a quiet but undeniable testimony. The spectators, too, began to notice something else. The way the courtroom itself seemed to shift. Witnesses who had previously been tense, lawyers who had been rigid with professionalism, and even jurors who were silently debating evidence all softened in subtle ways. There was a collective recognition that what they were about to witness could not be fully measured in legal terms. It was emotional, personal, and profoundly human. The presence of Rex, combined with the innocence of the little girl, created a stage for something extraordinary, something that no one, not even the most skeptical of officers, could ignore. The murmurs eventually faded as the judge prepared to continue. He signaled for the girl and Rex to step closer, a simple gesture, but one that seemed monumental given the attention they commanded. The mother gave a small nod, and the little girl, her tiny fingers brushing Rex's fur, walked forward. There was a silence so complete that every soft click of shoes against the courtroom floor and every faint rustle of paper seemed magnified. The tension, suspenseful yet oddly comforting, reached a palpable peak. Everyone present instinctively knew that something, remarkable something that would be remembered for years, was about to occur. Even the air seemed heavier, as if holding its breath in anticipation. And at that moment, in the calm yet electric atmosphere of the courtroom, the true story of courage, trust, and innocence was poised to unfold. It was a story that began with fear, but would culminate in connection. A story that required no words at first, only presence and understanding. As the girl reached out toward Rex, the room collectively leaned in, ready to witness a moment that would touch hearts, challenge assumptions, and remind everyone that sometimes the simplest gestures carry the deepest meanings. The stage was set, the audience captivated, and the world outside could only wait. Inside, in that courtroom that was anything but ordinary, a tiny girl and a police dog were about to redefine bravery, not through action or speech alone, but through the quiet, profound bond that connected them. And with that bond, they held the attention, hearts, and anticipation of everyone in the room, preparing for a story that would soon leave an indelible mark on every witness, officer, and spectator present. The story of the little girl and Rex began not in a courtroom, but on a quiet suburban street one late afternoon. The sun had started to dip behind the trees, casting long golden shadows on the pavement. Birds chirped lazily in the fading light, unaware that a moment of crisis was about to unfold. The girl, only 3 years old, had wandered a little too far from her home, chasing after a fluttering butterfly. Her tiny feet pattered against the concrete, her laughter carrying lightly on the wind. She was carefree, innocent, and completely unaware of the danger she was about to face. At that same moment, a police unit had been alerted to a potential threat in the neighborhood. Among the officers was Rex, a highly trained police dog, known for his sharp instincts, intelligence, and calm demeanor. He had served in multiple rescues and had been trained to detect danger, but even he could not have predicted the gentle mission that awaited him that day. When the alert came in about a missing child, his handler knew Rex's presence could provide both protection and comfort. Rare quality in a dog trained for high-risk operations. When Rex arrived, the scene was tense. The girl had stopped chasing the butterfly and was now staring at a small creek, unaware that she was dangerously close to the water. A sudden misstep could have led to disaster, but Rex, sensing the precarious situation, approached silently, his paws barely making a sound on the grass. The little girl froze at the sight of the massive dog, her eyes wide with fear. She had never been this close to a creature so large, and instinct told her to back away. But Rex did something unexpected. Instead of barking or moving aggressively, he lowered his massive head to her level, tail wagging gently, eyes calm and reassuring. It took only a few moments for the girl's fear to give way to curiosity. She reached out a tentative hand toward Rex, her tiny fingers brushing the soft fur on his snout. Rex responded with a gentle nuzzle, a warm exhale that seemed to say, "You're safe." In that instant, a bond was forged, one that went far beyond typical human-animal relationships. It was trust born out of instinct, empathy, and a shared understanding. Over the following days, the girl's visits to the police station became a small ritual. Her parents were initially cautious, worried about exposing her to a working police dog. But every interaction reassured them. Rex was patient, intuitive, and protective, allowing the girl to approach at her own pace. They played simple games, fetching a ball, learning basic commands, and even just sitting together while the girl hummed softly. Each session strengthened their connection, and those who witnessed it could not help but notice the subtle miracle taking place. A frightened, timid child discovering courage, comfort, and companionship in an unexpected form. It wasn't just about fun. The girl had experienced a small trauma before meeting Rex, a car accident that had left her hesitant and withdrawn, afraid of loud noises and strangers. Her parents had tried everything: therapy, playgroups, even gentle exposure to social situations. But nothing seemed to break through the walls she had built around herself. Rex became the bridge. His calm presence, his ability to respond to her emotions without judgment, and the gentle rhythm of his movements created an environment where the girl could explore trust again. Slowly, smiles replaced frowns, and her laughter, once timid, grew louder and more confident. The officers noticed too. Many of them had been hardened by years of service, used to seeing fear and trauma in various forms. But there was something unique about this bond. They watched the girl approach Rex, her tiny hands moving with growing confidence, and realized that the child's courage was not being forced. It was emerging naturally. She was learning from the dog's calm demeanor, internalizing his patience and trust, and reflecting it back in her actions. Rex, for his part, seemed to sense the importance of every interaction. He wasn't just protecting her physically. He was safeguarding her emotional world, offering reassurance that went far deeper than a simple wag of the tail. It was during these early encounters that the first seeds of what would become an extraordinary courtroom moment were planted. The girl had begun to communicate with Rex in ways that transcended words. A small glance, a gentle touch, or even a soft giggle could trigger a response from him, a nuzzle, a tilt of the head, or a protective stance. Observers marveled at how intuitively the dog seemed to understand her emotions. And the girl, in turn, began to mirror his calm, his courage, and his quiet confidence. They were teaching each other lessons that no classroom or therapy session could provide. As the bond deepened, so did the girl's bravery. Her parents watched with tears in their eyes as she explored spaces that had once terrified her. From busy parks to crowded sidewalks, always accompanied by Rex, the world had been intimidating, chaotic, and full of unknowns. But with her canine companion at her side, she began to navigate it with newfound confidence. It was a slow, delicate process, but every small step mattered. Each moment of trust reinforced the next, creating a foundation of courage that would one day become visible to the world in a courtroom filled with strangers. And so, when the day came for her to step into the courtroom alongside Rex, she was not just a frightened child. She was a young girl who had learned that courage could be found in connection, that trust could be nurtured in quiet ways, and that even a tiny voice could have profound impact. Rex, too, had grown in his understanding of his role, not just as a police dog, but as a companion, protector, and emotional guide. The bond they had formed was unusual, remarkable, and powerful. In the days leading up to the court appearance, the girl's parents recounted the story to anyone who would listen. They spoke of the timid child who had learned to smile again, of the dog whose patience and gentleness had created a safe space for healing, and of the quiet miracles that had taken place in small, ordinary moments. No one could have predicted that this bond would soon take center stage in a legal proceeding, or that the simple interaction between a girl and a dog would leave seasoned officers, journalists, and the public in awe. The courtroom was only the next stage of a journey that had already begun long before. Every glance, every gentle touch, every unspoken exchange had prepared the little girl and Rex for the moment when words would not be enough, and yet 2 simple words would change everything. It was a story of trust built from the ground up, a narrative of courage born from patience and companionship, and a testament to the power of connection between species. As the first part of the trial unfolded, observers could already see the effect. The girl's steps were measured but confident, her small hand brushing Rex's fur as a silent signal of mutual understanding. The officers whispered among themselves, the reporters held their breath, and the judge leaned forward, recognizing that this was no ordinary courtroom drama. It was a human story, at its most elemental level a tale of fear, trust, courage, and love that had been quietly nurtured over weeks of tender care and patient interaction. By the time the judge called the court to order, the audience was fully absorbed. They didn't just see a girl and a dog. They saw the culmination of a journey that had begun on a quiet street, a journey defined not by loud gestures or dramatic rescues, but by small, consistent acts of care, patience, and trust. And everyone present, whether consciously or not, understood that they were about to witness something extraordinary, an emotional truth that no legal argument could fully capture, but which would resonate far beyond the walls of the courtroom. The bond between the little girl and Rex was unlike anything anyone had anticipated. To the casual observer, it might have seemed simple, a child enjoying the company of a dog, but those who had witnessed their interactions knew it was far deeper, almost miraculous. Each day, the girl approached Rex with a mixture of curiosity, caution, and an innate sense of recognition. She seemed to understand instinctively that he was not merely an animal, but a guardian, a gentle protector whose very presence reassured her that the world was not as frightening as it had seemed. The first few interactions had been tentative. Her fingers had barely brushed his fur, and she had occasionally shrieked or stepped back at the slightest sudden movement. Rex, trained to detect tension and respond calmly, had adapted to her rhythm. He lowered his body, eyes soft, tail wagging ever so slightly, demonstrating patience that few humans could muster. He never rushed her. He never forced an interaction. Over time, those tiny gestures, noses nudging fingertips, soft exhales, the slight tilt of his head became a language in itself. It was in these moments of quiet communication that their bond deepened. She would sit beside him on the grass, tracing the outline of his ears with tiny fingers, and he would lie down, his massive frame a comforting presence against her smallness. She began to giggle, a sound that once had been rare and hesitant. That laughter, bright and unguarded, seemed to transform him as well. Rex's posture relaxed, his movements becoming even more fluid and gentle, responding intuitively to her moods. Together, they created a rhythm of trust and understanding that seemed almost telepathic. The girl's parents, initially wary, had become astonished observers. They had spent months worrying about their child's timid nature, about her fear of strangers, and her hesitation to engage with the world. Now, watching her approach a police dog with confidence and affection, they realized the power of the connection. Rex had become more than a protector. He had become a teacher, demonstrating through his calm presence how to face fear, how to trust, and how to express courage in small but profound ways. Even the officers at the precinct were quietly amazed. Many had dealt with trauma, fear, and danger for years, but they had never seen a case like this. Here was a toddler learning resilience and bravery from a dog trained for completely different purposes. Some skeptics had doubted whether the girl would ever engage with Rex, fearing she might be scared or uninterested. Yet time and again, she proved that the bond transcended fear, social expectations, and even the boundaries between human and animal. The process of building trust was gradual. At first, she merely watched him, hesitant to move too close. Rex responded with patience, lying quietly, his gaze soft and unthreatening. Then came small touches, hesitant and exploratory, each one met with gentle encouragement from the dog. Gradually, she began to communicate in subtle ways, soft hums, gentle squeezes, and even quiet words that Rex seemed to understand instinctively. Their interaction became almost ritualistic, each session building a layer of trust, forming an unspoken promise. She would feel safe, and he would protect her. What struck observers most was the mutuality of the bond. It was not one-sided. The girl learned from Rex, yes, but Rex too appeared to adapt to her emotions and reactions in ways beyond his formal training. He would position himself between her and unfamiliar visitors, not aggressively, but in a manner that subtly said, "I am here." He would mirror her moods, relaxing when she was calm, alerting when she was anxious, and responding with gentleness whenever she reached out. This responsiveness made it clear that their connection was a partnership rather than mere companionship. The moments of play and learning were intertwined with moments of healing. The girl had been shy, hesitant, and unsure of herself after a prior accident. Her confidence had been fragile, easily shaken by loud noises, strangers, or sudden movements. But with Rex, she explored the world incrementally. First a short walk in a quiet park, and a trip down the block, eventually even venturing into busier areas. Rex was always there, watchful, patient, unwavering. Every small success built her courage, and with each step, the invisible bond grew stronger, more unbreakable. Friends and family began noticing the change as well. When the girl returned home, she would recount the day's interactions with Rex, her words imbued with excitement and pride. "Rex stayed with me," she would say, beaming. "I wasn't scared." Her parents marveled at how a dog had become her anchor, her guide back to joy and confidence. They even started documenting these interactions, noting subtle shifts in behavior, emotional growth, and how laughter became more frequent than tears. There were moments that particularly touched those who observed them. On one occasion, the girl had tripped over a small curb, landing hard on her knees. She started to cry, startled and frightened. Rex immediately approached, nudging her gently with his nose, placing a paw close to her, as if offering comfort. The girl looked up, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "It's okay, Rex." The dog responded with a soft exhale and a reassuring nuzzle, and slowly her sobs subsided. It was in these small, ordinary moments that the extraordinary bond between them revealed itself. A profound understanding and trust, forged without words, but stronger than any spoken assurance. This bond eventually became the focus of their lives together. The girl's visits to the precinct, initially casual, were now central to her emotional development. Officers remarked that she would light up upon seeing Rex, and the dog's attention never wavered from her presence. Their interactions became almost ritualistic. A soft greeting, gentle play, a short walk, and quiet moments of companionship. Each visit reaffirmed the trust and friendship that had grown so unexpectedly, but so profoundly. By the time the courtroom day arrived, the bond was palpable to everyone in the room. Observers, from officers to jurors to spectators, could sense it immediately. The way the girl moved with confidence, the way Rex positioned himself protectively, yet calmly, the silent communication they shared, it was a language understood without words. Those who had followed their story recognized that what they were about to witness was not just a legal proceeding, but a culmination of weeks of patience, understanding, and mutual respect between a child and a dog. And perhaps most importantly, the bond was transformative. The girl had grown braver, happier, and more confident than ever before. Rex had demonstrated that protection and empathy could coexist in a way that few could imagine. Together, they had created something unique, a bridge between fear and trust, between hesitation and courage, and between innocence and understanding. Their bond was more than companionship. It was a testament to the power of patience, empathy, and connection. When the court proceedings began, every subtle nuance of their relationship was already visible to those present. The girl's small gestures toward Rex, her quiet reassurances, and the dog's calm, responsive demeanor conveyed a story far more powerful than any legal argument. The audience didn't just see a child and a dog, they witnessed a living example of trust, bravery, and the transformative power of unconditional support. And so, the stage was set. The bond, nurtured quietly over days and weeks, was now ready to speak for itself. In a room full of strangers, lawyers, and officers, the connection between a tiny girl and a police dog would soon demonstrate that sometimes words are unnecessary, and a simple act of trust can move hearts more profoundly than anything else. The courtroom was no longer just a place for legal proceedings. It had become a theater for empathy, courage, and the miraculous power of an unlikely bond. The day of the courtroom appearance arrived with a quiet intensity that seemed to ripple through every corner of the building. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the courthouse windows, and reporters shuffled their notes, cameras poised to capture what promised to be an extraordinary story. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. This was no ordinary trial. The presence of a tiny 3-year-old girl and a fully grown police dog had transformed the courtroom into a space where emotions outweighed legal formalities. Every participant, from the judge to the jury to the onlookers, could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. The courtroom doors opened, and all eyes turned as the little girl stepped inside, her small hand tightly gripping her mother's. Beside her moved Rex, calm and composed, yet exuding a presence that filled the room. His harness gleamed under the overhead lights, and the polished badge on his side seemed almost symbolic of the role he had taken in this girl's life. Protector, companion, and silent advocate. There was a stillness that came over the room, a collective breath held as everyone absorbed the unlikely pair before them. Even hardened reporters and officers, accustomed to tense and dramatic situations, felt a softening in their chest, a recognition that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The judge, a man with decades of experience in the law, adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, curiosity evident in his gaze. "We are gathered here for a case unlike any other," he began, his voice calm but resonant, cutting through the hushed whispers. "While legal matters are at hand, today we will also witness an extraordinary display of courage, trust, and the human-animal connection. I ask all present to observe closely, for the events you are about to see may leave a lasting impression beyond the walls of this courtroom." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with anticipation. No one spoke. The silence that followed was thick, almost reverent. The girl's mother knelt briefly beside her, smoothing her hair and whispering words of encouragement. "You're brave," she said softly. The girl's lips quivered in a small, determined smile, and she straightened, standing a little taller despite her tiny frame. Rex, sensing the subtle tension, nudged her hand gently with his nose, his presence both grounding and reassuring. It was a silent dialogue, one that no one else could fully interpret, yet everyone in the courtroom seemed to sense its profound significance. The defense and prosecution lawyers exchanged glances, unsure of what to expect. While they were trained to focus on evidence and arguments, the emotional gravity of the scene unsettled even them. Their usual confidence was tempered by the unmistakable connection between the girl and Rex. The officers who had accompanied them were quiet, observing in awe, recognizing that the dog's training had never fully prepared anyone for the depth of empathy he displayed. This was more than a security detail or a rescue mission. This was a moment of emotional truth in its purest form. As the proceedings began, witnesses were called, each presenting facts of the case, yet the audience's attention drifted again and again toward the little girl and Rex. The child's calm presence, paired with the dog's gentle watchfulness, drew eyes and hearts inescapably. Observers noted how the girl's posture exuded confidence she had never displayed before, and how Rex, massive and imposing, moved with the soft, subtle grace of someone who understood exactly what his role required. He was a living anchor, and the girl clung to that anchor in ways that were both tender and courageous. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the girl's moment approached. Everyone instinctively understood that she would be more than a spectator. She would be a participant in a way that transcended conventional testimony. The quiet anticipation was nearly unbearable, a mixture of curiosity, hope, and emotional suspense. Journalists leaned forward, pens poised, cameras at the ready, capturing every small movement. Officers exchanged subtle nods, acknowledging the extraordinary nature of what they were about to witness. The judge's eyes softened, as though he too felt the unspoken story that had led the girl and Rex to this moment. Then came the signal. The little girl took a tentative step toward the center of the courtroom, Rex at her side, calm and alert. The crowd held its collective breath. She stopped, glanced down at the dog, and reached out, tiny fingers brushing his fur, in a gesture both familiar and profoundly symbolic. In that instant, the courtroom transformed from a place of formal procedure into a theater of human emotion. Every eye followed the subtle interaction, every heart quietly racing, sensing that something remarkable was about to happen. The subtle drama of their interaction spoke louder than words. The girl tilted her head, her expression a mixture of trust and determination. Rex responded immediately, nuzzling her hand gently, maintaining an unwavering, calm presence. Observers felt a wave of warmth sweep through the room, an emotional resonance that surpassed logic or expectation. The pair communicated in a language all their own, a language of trust, reassurance, and silent courage. Even the most skeptical officers, accustomed to danger and trauma, found themselves caught in the emotional current, unable to look away. As the minutes ticked by, the courtroom seemed suspended in time. Lawyers paused mid-note, jurors leaned forward in silent fascination, and spectators sat rigid with anticipation. The little girl's tiny frame radiated bravery, her confidence magnified by the steady presence of Rex. Each small movement, from the tilt of her head to the gentle touch of her hand, was mirrored by the dog in subtle yet profound ways. The unspoken dialogue between them conveyed messages that no witness statement or piece of evidence could capture: courage, trust, and an almost sacred understanding that transcended age, species, and circumstance. Officers who had trained Rex in various high-pressure scenarios marveled at his response. He remained calm, focused, and gentle, attuned perfectly to the girl's smallest gestures. It was a display of discipline and empathy so refined that it defied explanation. Observers whispered quietly among themselves, speculating on how a dog trained for law enforcement had developed such an intuitive understanding of human emotion, particularly that of a small child. But no one had answers, only awe, respect, and a growing sense that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The judge finally spoke again, his voice measured but tinged with emotion. "What you are witnessing is not merely a courtroom procedure," he said. "It is a lesson in courage, in trust, and in the power of connection. Let us pay attention not just to the facts, but to the human story unfolding before us." Heads nodded quietly in agreement, and the room seemed to collectively shift its focus, embracing the moment for what it truly was, a display of resilience, compassion, and the quiet bravery of a small child and a loyal dog. The final moments before the girl spoke were charged with anticipation. Her hand rested lightly on Rex's fur, her eyes meeting his, and the dog's calm gaze met hers in perfect understanding. The entire courtroom felt the tension, a mixture of awe and suspense so tangible it was almost physical. Every heartbeat seemed synchronized with the quiet rhythm of their bond. Every breath held an expectation of the miracle about to occur. And in that fragile, electric silence, it became clear. Whatever happened next would be unforgettable. When the first words finally came, they were preceded by a stillness so profound that it seemed the world itself had paused. The girl, standing no taller than a stack of law books, leaned toward Rex and whispered softly. The dog responded immediately, his large, gentle frame shifting closer, his warm breath brushing her fingers. That tiny whisper carried a weight far beyond its size, reaching into the hearts of everyone present. Eyes widened, tears formed, and a hush descended, a hush that would not soon be broken, for everyone instinctively knew that they were witnessing a moment that would linger in memory for years to come. The courtroom drama had reached its peak, not through anger, evidence, or argument, but through the profound, silent language shared by a small child and a loyal police dog. It was a reminder that courage could be quiet, bravery could be gentle, and the most extraordinary stories often unfold in the smallest gestures. The courtroom had been silent for what felt like an eternity, each person waiting for the next extraordinary moment to unfold. The little girl stood at the center, her hand lightly resting on Rex's fur. Her wide eyes, filled with both courage and innocence, scanned the massive room of strangers, officers, jurors, and reporters. Every pair of eyes was locked on her, yet she didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Instead, her gaze returned to Rex, as though seeking permission, reassurance, or perhaps simply sharing a silent understanding. Rex, fully aware of the moment's weight, remained calm and poised, his body a fortress of gentle protection. For weeks leading up to this day, the bond between the girl and Rex had grown in quiet, almost invisible ways. But now, under the bright courtroom lights and the scrutiny of dozens of people, that bond would manifest in the simplest, most profound form imaginable. The air in the room was thick with anticipation. Breaths were held collectively, the tension so palpable it could have been sliced with a knife. The girl took a small step closer to Rex, and the dog shifted slightly, lowering his massive head to her level, tail flicking gently, as if to say, "I am here. I am with you." The first words came softly, almost inaudible to the courtroom at large. She leaned forward, tiny lips barely moving, and whispered, "It's okay." 2 words, simple yet monumental. The effect was instantaneous. Every head in the room turned, every heart skipped a beat. The words themselves were not remarkable for their complexity or length. They were remarkable for their power. the weight they carried, and the sincerity they conveyed. These 2 words, spoken by a fragile, brave child, reached far beyond the ordinary realm of communication. They were a lifeline, a bridge of understanding between a small human heart and a massive canine protector. Rex responded immediately. His massive head lowered further, resting gently against her shoulder. His warm breath brushed her cheek in a gesture of comfort. The girl's hand, now fully relaxed, stroked his fur with quiet assurance, a motion that spoke volumes to everyone watching. The courtroom was utterly silent, save for the subtle rustle of paper and the faint sound of the girl's soft voice. And yet, in that silence, an emotional wave swept through every observer. Eyes widened, tears pricked the corners of faces, and even the judge seemed momentarily moved, his pen hovering over his notes, forgotten. The prosecutors, defense attorneys, and officers alike were caught in the moment. It was impossible to maintain the usual professional detachment. For once, legal arguments and evidence felt secondary to the raw, unfiltered humanity unfolding before them. The room, once filled with anticipation and curiosity, now pulsed with awe and empathy. People leaned forward instinctively, as if trying to draw closer to the simple, yet profound, exchange between a child and a dog. Even journalists, accustomed to capturing stories for the world, paused, recognizing that what was happening transcended headlines. What followed was almost magical. Rex, the trained police dog, leaned in closer, nudging the girl gently with his nose, as if to acknowledge her courage. His massive paw rested protectively beside her feet, not in intimidation, but in silent guardianship. The girl's eyes glimmered with the first trace of tears, but they were tears of relief, comfort, and profound joy. In that moment, she was not just a vulnerable child. She was a beacon of trust and bravery, her innocence and sincerity radiating through the room like sunlight through a window. The 2 words resonated further than anyone could have anticipated. Witnesses who had been tense moments ago now found themselves leaning back, exhaling slowly, feeling the tension drain away. Parents in the gallery clutched their children, whispering softly about the courage it takes to speak even a single word in a room full of strangers. Officers, normally composed and stoic, wiped subtle tears from their eyes, caught off guard by the overwhelming humanity of the scene. The courtroom, usually a place of debate, contention, and formality, had transformed into a sanctuary of empathy, witness to a bond that could not be defined by rules or law. For the girl, those 2 words were more than reassurance to Rex. They were reassurance to herself. She had learned, over weeks of patient interaction, that courage could exist alongside fear, and trust could flourish even after trauma. Speaking those words out loud, in a room full of strangers and authority figures, was a declaration of her resilience, a demonstration of the growth she had achieved through her bond with Rex. Every observer could feel it, intuitively understanding that they were witnessing not only a touching interaction, but also the culmination of a quiet journey of healing, patience, and mutual love. The emotional resonance of the moment continued to grow. Jurors blinked rapidly, dabbing at tears. Even the judge, seasoned in courtroom drama, allowed a soft smile to form, acknowledging the simple power of the girl's words. Media cameras clicked softly, capturing the fleeting expressions of wonder and awe. In that instant, the courtroom had become something more than a place for legal proceedings. It was a living stage, showcasing the profound effect of trust, empathy, and the innocence of a child on everyone fortunate enough to witness it. The dog's response continued in subtle but powerful ways. He leaned his massive body closer to the girl, offering warmth and assurance, his gentle breathing almost in sync with hers. Every person in the room could see it, feel it, and understand it, even without words. The interplay between them, a mixture of quiet gestures, gentle nudges, and heartfelt communication, was a demonstration of emotional intelligence that transcended species. Observers were struck by how such a bond, cultivated quietly over weeks, had reached its most powerful expression at the exact moment when it mattered most. The girl's parents, standing a short distance away, were overcome with emotion. Tears streamed down their faces as they watched their tiny daughter stand bravely and speak her 2 words. The mother whispered softly to herself, "She's stronger than I ever imagined." The father, normally composed and reserved, nodded silently, recognizing that the presence of Rex had given his daughter something far more valuable than protection. It had given her courage, confidence, and a voice. The entire family felt the weight of the moment, understanding that these 2 words would remain etched in their memory forever. As the moment lingered, the room seemed to collectively exhale. The tension dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of connection and shared humanity. The girl stepped back slightly, resting her hand once more on Rex's fur, and he remained by her side, unwavering in his calm presence. The words had done more than communicate reassurance. They had symbolized the journey the pair had undertaken together, from fear to trust, from hesitation to courage, and from uncertainty to unspoken understanding. The courtroom remained hushed, as if no one dared break the spell of those 2 words. Even when whispers began to ripple softly through the audience, the emotional impact lingered. Lawyers glanced at each other, officers exchanged silent nods, and spectators dabbed at tears, all sharing in the unifying power of a moment that was both incredibly simple and profoundly moving. This was the apex of the story, the point where the bond between a child and a dog had transcended ordinary observation, leaving every witness humbled, inspired, and profoundly touched. In the days that followed, the story would spread far beyond the walls of the courthouse. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. The 2 words, softly spoken, had bridged fear and trust, human and animal, vulnerability and bravery. Every eye that had witnessed the exchange would carry its memory, a lasting reminder that even the smallest voice could create an overwhelming impact. And as the girl and Rex stood side by side, basking in the quiet warmth of their mutual understanding, the courtroom experienced something extraordinary, a miracle of simplicity, courage, and love. Those 2 words were enough. They healed, they inspired, and they connected. They proved that bravery need not be loud, and courage need not be grand. Sometimes the simplest gesture, the quietest reassurance, can ripple through hearts, leaving a lasting impression that words alone could never capture. In that courtroom, the little girl and her faithful companion had demonstrated something timeless and universal: the power of trust, the strength of love, and the enduring magic of connection between 2 souls, no matter how small or unlikely one of them might be. The courtroom remained hushed long after the little girl's 2 words had been spoken. The simple phrase, "It's okay," lingered in the air like a soft echo, resonating far beyond its immediate sound. Every person present felt it differently, but no less profoundly. The jurors, who had been focused intently on legal proceedings moments before, now sat in silent awe, their usual analytical detachment replaced by a rare vulnerability. Even the most experienced officers and lawyers, who had seen countless high-stakes situations, felt their hearts stir with something unspoken yet undeniable: the quiet, transformative power of trust and innocence. Spectators whispered quietly among themselves, sharing glances of recognition that this was not just a courtroom moment, it was a life-affirming experience. Parents held their children a little closer. Officers adjusted their posture, as if trying to internalize the calm and reassurance Rex projected. Some journalists, usually trained to maintain professional distance, dabbed at their eyes or paused mid-note, struck by the simplicity and profundity of the scene. Here was courage displayed, not through words or action alone, but through presence, connection, and trust. In those fleeting seconds, the entire courtroom had been subtly transformed. The ripple effect extended beyond mere observation. Emotional waves traveled through the room like invisible currents, touching every person present. Officers whispered softly to one another about the miraculous bond between the girl and Rex. "Look at how he responds," one murmured, admiration heavy in his voice. "I've never seen a dog read human emotion like that." Lawyers exchanged knowing nods, silently acknowledging that no legal argument could compete with the pure, unfiltered humanity of what they had just witnessed. Even the judge, a man long accustomed to controlling the flow of proceedings, found himself moved in ways that transcended his role. The parents, though brimming with pride and relief, were overwhelmed with emotion. Tears streamed down their faces as they watched their daughter, so small and fragile in appearance, stand with unshakable courage beside her canine companion. They had witnessed weeks of careful growth, patient nurturing, and quiet healing, but seeing it manifested in the courtroom was beyond anything they had imagined. Their daughter, who had once been timid and hesitant, now embodied a bravery that radiated outward, touching the hearts of every observer. The officers stationed nearby felt the moment keenly. They were trained to respond to danger, to maintain order and authority. Yet this scene reminded them of a truth they often overlooked. Courage and heroism were not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes bravery was quiet. Sometimes it was gentle. And sometimes it was expressed through the unspoken dialogue between a small child and a loyal dog, a bond that required patience, empathy, and understanding. Observers outside the immediate courtroom, including media representatives, began to grasp the significance of what had unfolded. As the story spread, social media posts, news headlines, and live reports captured the essence of the moment. A child speaking 2 words to a dog, and the dog responding in a way that transcended training or instinct. Videos showed the interaction, hearts melted, and the story quickly became emblematic of something universal: the power of connection, trust, and compassion. People from around the world, many of whom had never met the child or Rex, felt the emotional resonance. Inside the courtroom, the ripple continued. Jurors found themselves reconsidering not just the evidence presented, but also the lesson inherent in what they had witnessed. The interaction between the girl and Rex reminded them of the essential humanity behind every case, every individual, and every act of courage. Even in a legal environment where facts and law typically reign supreme, there was room for empathy, understanding, and acknowledgement of human and animal connection. The courtroom, for those few moments, had become something more than procedural. It had become a space for reflection, inspiration, and emotional revelation. The ripple extended to the girl herself. Standing beside Rex, she could feel the warmth of the dog's reassurance and the silent approval of everyone around her. She understood, even in her small way, that she had been heard, that she had made an impact. The fear she had once carried had been replaced by confidence, the anxiety replaced by trust. Those 2 words, spoken softly yet profoundly, had reinforced the courage she had cultivated over weeks of interaction with Rex. They were not just words to comfort the dog, they were words to comfort herself. A declaration of resilience, bravery, and growth. Rex, too, experienced the ripple, though in a way only a loyal, intelligent dog could. He sensed the calm acceptance of the room, the quiet awe radiating from the spectators, and the relief and pride emanating from the little girl. His training had prepared him for danger, for protection, for precise tasks, but nothing could have prepared him for the emotional resonance of this moment. He responded not with instinct alone, but with empathy, recognizing the girl's courage and returning it with the gentle, steadfast loyalty that had defined their bond from the beginning. Even the judge, who had spent decades presiding over cases of varying gravity, was moved. He leaned forward in his seat, absorbing the quiet miracle before him. There was no precedent for what he was witnessing, no legal framework to quantify its significance. Yet he understood, on a fundamental level, that the bond between the girl and Rex had achieved something extraordinary. It had transcended the limitations of circumstance, offering hope, reassurance, and inspiration to all who witnessed it. The ripple did not stop with the courtroom. News of the moment spread quickly through the precinct, touching the officers who had trained Rex, the staff who had supported the girl's visits, and eventually, the broader community. Parents spoke of the power of simple gestures of kindness. Children were inspired to show bravery in small ways. And the public began to grasp the universal truth embedded in the story. Courage is not measured by size or strength alone. And the smallest acts of trust and empathy can have profound effects. In the days that followed, letters and messages poured in from people who had been touched by the story. Some shared personal experiences of fear, overcome through small acts of courage. Others recounted tales of unlikely bonds with animals that had transformed their lives. It was clear that the 2 words spoken by a tiny girl to a police dog had resonated far beyond the courtroom walls, creating a ripple effect that extended into homes, schools, and communities. The emotional ripple was also deeply personal. For the girl and her family, it was validation of their journey, a confirmation that the patience, care, and love invested over weeks of interaction with Rex had borne fruit in the most extraordinary way. For Rex, it was recognition of his role, not just as a protector, but as a companion, mentor, and emotional guide. And for the world watching, it was a reminder of the power inherent in trust, connection, and empathy, and the profound impact that even the simplest gestures can have. By the end of the day, the courtroom had returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of the moment lingered. Officers, jurors, lawyers, and spectators left with hearts touched, minds inspired, and spirits quietly transformed. The ripple would continue, extending far beyond those present, reaching families, children, and strangers across the globe who would hear the story, feel the emotion, and carry its lesson forward. The little girl and Rex had created more than a courtroom sensation. They had created a testament to the transformative power of connection. Through 2 simple words and the steady presence of a loyal dog, they had reminded the world that courage and empathy are not measured by size, age, or status. They are measured by the willingness to trust, to care, and to act with sincerity, even in the smallest gestures. And for everyone who witnessed it, that lesson would linger long after the courthouse doors had closed, leaving hearts full and eyes misted with tears. The courtroom moment had ended, but its effects rippled far beyond the walls of the courthouse. For the little girl, her life began to transform in ways no one had imagined. The confidence she had gained from her bond with Rex now extended into every corner of her young life. She approached playgrounds, classrooms, and even social gatherings with newfound courage, her small hand often seeking the invisible reassurance that Rex's presence had once provided. Where she had previously hesitated, she now moved forward, emboldened by the trust and bravery she had cultivated alongside her canine companion. Her parents noticed the change immediately. Tasks that had once caused tears, hesitation, or anxiety were now met with smiles, curiosity, and determination. Simple routines, walking to the corner store, playing with neighborhood children, attending early learning classes, became exercises in independence and joy. The family's daily life, once marked by caution and constant supervision, slowly transformed into one of shared laughter and quiet triumphs. They marveled at how a bond with a dog had unlocked courage and resilience in their daughter, something therapy and guidance alone had struggled to achieve. Rex, too, experienced a subtle shift. No longer just a working police dog or a tool for safety, he became a companion whose role extended beyond formal duty. His presence continued to reassure the girl, But he also began to engage with her in playful, gentle ways outside of structured visits. Walks became shared adventures. Games of fetch took on a ritualistic quality, and quiet moments of companionship strengthened their trust even further. Observers often remarked on the dog's uncanny ability to sense the girl's emotions, responding instantly with subtle cues that reminded her she was never alone. The wider community became aware of their story through media coverage, social media posts, and local news segments. The courtroom video, showing the girl's whispered 2 words and Rex's gentle response, went viral. People everywhere were captivated by the simplicity and depth of the moment, and it inspired a wave of empathy and connection. Teachers, parents, and children shared the video in classrooms and homes, using it as a lesson in courage, compassion, and trust. People reached out to the family with letters of encouragement, stories of their own experiences, and heartfelt messages about how the bond had touched them deeply. Schools began discussing the story, emphasizing the importance of empathy, resilience, and emotional intelligence. Children were encouraged to express their feelings, care for animals, and recognize the value of trust and loyalty in relationships. The little girl, unaware of the full reach of her impact, found herself celebrated quietly by those around her, not for the words themselves, but for the bravery and heart behind them. Teachers noted that her newfound confidence inspired classmates to face challenges with similar courage, and counselors often pointed to her example as a reminder of how emotional bonds can foster growth. The courtroom officers, who had witnessed the moment firsthand, often spoke of it in hushed tones. For many, it became a defining memory, a reminder that their work was not just about enforcement or procedure, but also about human connection and the potential for subtle acts to make monumental differences. Some began advocating for more programs that paired trained animals with children experiencing trauma or fear, citing the girl and Rex as a living example of the power such relationships could wield. The family's personal life also shifted in subtle ways. Relatives who had once worried constantly about the girl's timidity began to see her take initiative, explore freely, and interact with others without hesitation. Playdates, family gatherings, and neighborhood outings became opportunities for her to shine, her confidence building naturally with every step. The parents noted that her laughter, once hesitant and quiet, now rang freely through the home, a sound that had been absent for far too long. And while Rex could not speak, his presence became a silent testament to the journey they had undertaken together, a story of trust, patience, and unconditional support that reshaped the girl's young life. The broader public response added another layer of significance. Advocacy groups, educators, and child psychologists analyzed the story, emphasizing the importance of emotional support animals for children who had experienced trauma or fear. The girl and Rex became quiet symbols of what could be achieved when empathy, patience, and courage intersected. News outlets repeatedly highlighted the courtroom moment, describing it as a turning point, not only for the child, but also for anyone witnessing the profound interaction between human and animal. Social media users shared countless posts praising the lesson embedded in the story. Courage is not measured by size, and trust can transform even the most vulnerable hearts. Yet for all the attention and acclaim, the girl and her family maintained a grounded, humble perspective. They did not seek recognition. They were simply living the life that had grown from small, tender moments of care. Walks with Rex continued, playdates remained joyful and exploratory, and everyday routines became opportunities for confidence and independence. The family recognized that the impact of the courtroom moment would last, but they also knew the real work, the slow, consistent nurturing of trust and courage, was what truly mattered. Rex remained a central part of their lives. Though the public marveled at his courtroom demeanor and responsiveness, at home, he was simply a companion, a source of comfort, joy, and reassurance. The girl spoke to him in ways that were both verbal and unspoken, her trust in him absolute. And through these quiet, ordinary interactions, she continued to grow emotionally, socially, and spiritually, learning lessons about bravery, empathy, and the profound impact of connection. Over time, the story of the girl and Rex became more than a media sensation. It became a cultural touchstone. It inspired discussions in classrooms, professional training sessions, and parenting groups. People reflected on the power of compassion, the value of nonverbal communication, and the importance of patience in fostering trust. And for those who had witnessed the courtroom drama firsthand, the memory remained vivid, a touchstone of courage, innocence, and the extraordinary potential of an unlikely friendship. Even as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the ripple of that moment continued to be felt. The courtroom recording circulated in educational programs, community workshops, and online forums, reminding everyone of the transformative power of trust and empathy. Parents shared the story with their children, emphasizing that courage could take many forms, and that even the smallest voice could create a lasting impact. And for the girl, life after that day became a continuous journey of growth and exploration. She faced challenges with confidence, approached strangers with curiosity rather than fear, and engaged with the world in ways that had once seemed impossible. The lessons learned from Rex's patience, trust, resilience, and love became foundational to her understanding of the world. In the quiet corners of her life, in playful moments and everyday adventures, the influence of that courtroom moment endured, shaping her into a child of courage and compassion, forever guided by the bond she had formed with a dog who had listened, understood, and protected her in ways words alone could never convey. The courtroom moment had long passed, but the story of the little girl and Rex was far from over. Their bond, forged in quiet moments of trust and nurtured over weeks of patience, had transformed not just the girl, but everyone who had witnessed it. Time moved forward, as it always does, yet the lessons of courage, empathy, and resilience lingered, echoing quietly through the lives they touched. For the little girl, now growing steadily into a confident, joyful child, Rex was more than a dog. He was a teacher, a protector, a silent confidant, and a steadfast friend, a living symbol of love that transcended words. Every morning, the girl woke with anticipation, her tiny hand seeking Rex's fur before anything else. The dog, ever loyal, greeted her with a gentle nuzzle, a warm presence that reminded her that no matter the challenges of the day, she was never alone. Together, they embarked on small adventures, walks through the neighborhood, visits to the park, and quiet moments in the backyard. Each activity reinforcing the lessons of trust, courage, and companionship. It was a life grounded in routine, yet rich in emotional depth, shaped by the extraordinary bond that had begun on a quiet suburban street and culminated in a courtroom filled with awe. Her parents often watched in silent wonder, reflecting on the remarkable journey their daughter had taken. They remembered the days when fear dominated her small world, when a simple trip outside or encounter with strangers could provoke tears or hesitation. They remembered the gentle patience required to nurture her trust, the long afternoons spent in quiet observation, and the careful guidance that allowed her to grow at her own pace. And above all, they remembered Rex, the dog, whose calm presence and intuitive understanding had been the catalyst for this transformation. Together, girl and dog had rewritten the narrative of fear into a story of resilience, courage, and enduring love. Outside the family home, their story continued to resonate. Schools used it to teach children about empathy, resilience, and the importance of caring for others. Communities highlighted it in programs for children who had experienced trauma, demonstrating that even small gestures of trust and kindness could have profound effects. The courtroom video, which captured the two words that had changed everything, circulated widely, inspiring people across the country and around the world. Teachers, psychologists, parents, and students marveled at the story, recognizing that its message was universal. Bravery is not measured by size or strength, and the simplest acts of trust can ripple far beyond imagination. For Rex, life continued as both protector and friend. He had retired from active duty, but remained an essential presence in the girl's daily life. Every gesture, from a gentle nuzzle to the subtle shift of his massive body beside her, reinforced the lessons he had imparted. Though he could not speak, his actions conveyed understanding, reassurance, and unwavering loyalty. In many ways, he was her anchor in an often chaotic world, a living reminder that courage and trust were cultivated not through grand gestures, but through patience, presence, and unconditional care. The girl, growing older, began to understand in her own way the significance of what had transpired. She recognized that her courage was not innate but nurtured, built through countless small interactions, each one guided by Rex's calm, attentive presence. She began to extend that empathy to others, showing care and kindness to friends, family, and even strangers. Her experiences became a foundation for a life defined by compassion and courage, a legacy rooted in the quiet yet profound bond she shared with a loyal dog who had changed her world. The family's life, once cautious and tentative, had transformed completely. They traveled, explored new environments, and engaged with their community more openly. Each adventure, each encounter, reinforced the lessons of trust and bravery. And through it all, Rex remained by the girl's side, a constant reminder of the extraordinary journey they had undertaken together. Friends and neighbors often remarked on the remarkable synchronicity between them. A small child radiating confidence, and a dog providing unwavering support, their connection evident in every glance, every gesture, every moment of shared understanding. As the girl grew, the bond remained unbroken. Even as she began to explore the world with increasing independence, the lessons Rex had instilled endured. She approached challenges with courage, comforted others with empathy, and faced fears with the quiet resilience she had cultivated through her unique relationship with the dog. And Rex, ever attentive, remained a guardian not just physically, but emotionally, silently ensuring that she navigated the world with confidence and security. The courtroom moment, which had captivated so many, became a symbol of what can be achieved when trust, patience, and compassion intersect. It was shared in classrooms, training programs, and media outlets as an enduring example of the power of human-animal connections. People marveled at the simplicity and profundity of the story. A tiny girl whispering 2 words, a dog responding with empathy and understanding, and a courtroom transformed by the quiet bravery of both. It was a tale that reminded the world of the importance of kindness, trust, and emotional connection, a story that would be retold for generations. Even as the years passed, the story remained vivid in the memories of those who had witnessed it. Jurors, officers, and courtroom staff spoke of the moment with reverence, recalling the profound silence that followed the girl's words, the gentle response of the dog, and the wave of emotion that swept through everyone present. It was a shared memory of courage and trust, a reminder that the most extraordinary experiences are often rooted in the simplest acts of empathy. The little girl grew into a young, confident individual, forever shaped by her early experiences with Rex. Her bravery, resilience, and empathy became hallmarks of her character. And though the world continued to change around her, the lessons learned from those quiet interactions remained steadfast. Trust can be nurtured, courage can be cultivated, and the bonds we form, human or animal, can change lives in ways beyond measure. Rex, now older and retired from official duties, lived his days quietly beside the girl and her family. His gentle presence, unwavering loyalty, and intuitive understanding continued to guide her, a living testament to the extraordinary power of connection. Friends and family often marveled at the unspoken dialogue between them, a language of trust and love that needed no words, but conveyed everything that mattered. In the end, the story of the little girl and Rex became more than a courtroom anecdote or viral sensation. It became a timeless tale of resilience, empathy, and the transformative power of trust. It reminded the world that courage comes in many forms, that the simplest words can carry extraordinary weight, and that bonds forged through patience, kindness, and understanding endure far beyond the moments in which they are first recognized. The bond they shared, quiet, profound, and unwavering, would last forever. Every glance, every gentle nuzzle, every soft whisper reaffirmed the lessons they had taught each other, that fear can be met with bravery, that trust can transform hearts, and that love, even in its simplest form, can leave a lasting impact on the world. And so, as they continued their life together, side by side, the girl and Rex carried forward a legacy of courage, compassion, and the enduring magic of an unlikely friendship that had touched hearts far beyond their own.